So once again, I'm telling the American people we must be patient. Russia faces material challenges that are impacting its ability to wage war in Ukraine, mainly because Russia's loss of equipment outpaces its ability to replace it. Currently, substantial stocks of Soviet-era equipment help bridge this gap, but these reserves are projected to run out within the next 18 to 24 months. After these supplies are exhausted, the invasion won't necessarily abruptly end, but Russia will struggle to sustain its efforts. Alternatives do exist, such as sourcing equipment from other countries, but these come with their own set of challenges and additional costs. Russia may look to China for equipment, for instance, but this could expose China to sanctions and incur significant costs for Russia because China's not just going to be handing it over cheaply. Compounding this issue, Russia's national wealth fund is expected to be depleted around the same time. Consequently, Russia will have to finance equipment purchases through deficits or by using natural resource sales. Now let's look at some key metrics that support this assessment. In just over 2 years, Russia has lost somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 tanks. They've lost around 5,000 artillery pieces and around 10,000 armored vehicles since the invasion began. Now, these may not have been total catastrophic kills, meaning they could have potentially been repaired, but the majority of these losses are catastrophic. Before the war, Russia had 12,400 tanks, 8,000 artillery pieces, and around 20,000 armored personnel carriers on paper. And much of the remaining equipment that they still have is older, since Russia has brought much of their newer equipment other than their most advanced tanks and aircraft to the battlefield. And the reason they haven't brought their most advanced stuff is because they don't want it, number one, to be shown as weak and get destroyed, but also they don't want it captured. And we can absolutely analyze what the capabilities are that Russia brings to the battlefield with things like the T-14 or some of their more advanced quote-unquote 5th gen, or what I call 4.5 gen fighters. So just quick back of the book math though, based on those numbers, and you can see this war has depleted roughly half of Russia's ground combat power in just 2 years. As Ukraine's support grows globally, Russia's land capability will wither even further. This is because reports indicate that Russia's defense industry is struggling to keep up with war demands. While artillery rounds and small arms ammunition production is stable in Russia, that's the only thing. And if Russia needs to surge on the battlefield, they deplete their round capacity far faster than they anticipate. And we saw this in the recent Kharkiv offensive. Advanced ammunition such as guided missiles are even more problematic, but not as much as replacing advanced firing platforms. Those are seeing a replacement rate of only 1 for every 10 destroyed, and it is largely propped up through equipment cannibalization, third-party technology, and dual-use technology coming from China and other pseudo-supporters of Russia. Russia has been forced to rely on older equipment reserves, and some of them are as old as 80 years old. As I said before, analysts estimate these reserves will be depleted within 18 to 24 months, just based on the attrition rate we've seen since the beginning of the war. These stockpiles have been crucial in offsetting production shortfalls, but are not infinite. So circling back to the Russian National Wealth Fund, this fund is basically how Russia has been able to continue to fund the war outside of its normal budgetary constraints for defense. And since the start of the invasion, Russia's National Wealth Fund has been cut in half due to the war, falling by $58 billion. At the current rate, this will deplete the entire fund by mid to late 2026, and Putin is aware of this. Russia is also struggling to borrow its way out of the situation, as the World Bank has not approved any loans to Russia since 2014, and a lot of countries find Russia to be far too risky to be investing in. Russia can rely on loans from China, who is increasing investment, but most of the time these are self-serving loans for China. They are in yuan only, meaning China is requiring Russia to buy Chinese, and that is very sly of them. However, this is not sustainable, even for non-military trade, and China is largely refusing to overtly sell weapons to Russia for fear of incurring Western sanctions. And if China has wartime ambitions aimed at Taiwan, they won't provide weapons to Russia anyway. Russia can liquidate energy holdings, but those hit the market at severe cuts as countries like India and China smell blood in the water and are taking advantage of Russia's situation. India has been buying Russian oil at a discount as low as 20% off the market price and is using it for their own consumption, then selling the excess back to the market for a profit. With equipment shortages and a lack of money to fund the war at current levels, Russia is going to return to tactics of old. They've already started doing it, and they're going to rely more on infantry, these human wave tactics, leading to higher casualty rates. Russian military casualties have already been significant, surpassing 500,000 casualties according to Ukraine, and are likely to increase. As such, Putin is preparing his country for more austere measures to serve his war aims. In a series of speeches over the past few days, Putin has said that all Russians must understand they are living through a unique and historical moment. He urged the population to, quote, work as if they are on the front line and to, quote, feel mobilized for Russia to achieve its goals. He is frequently invoking the mythos of the Great Patriotic War, which is also known as World War II, to inspire support and confidence in Russia's war effort. Putin's remarks are aimed at evoking similar memories and patriotic fervor of the Soviet sacrifice and full-scale social and economic mobilization that came during World War II, and that Russians must feel patriotic about this Ukraine war in a similar manner. Now, where some are seeing what Putin says as a potential threat that he is putting his economy on a wartime footing, that he's preparing his population for quote-unquote total war, I see it differently. I see concern from a withering authoritarian and an appeal to Russian people to treat this war as a defining moment requiring every Russian to help out. And that, honestly, if anything, it shows Putin's anxiety that his people are growing less tolerant of the death and economic strife being inflicted upon them for a Ukraine that most never cared about anyway. Thus, Putin is concerned that he is going to start losing domestic support for his war. So with regard to us in the collective West, as always, patience and support is crucial. While Russia is not on the verge of collapse, the war will become progressively harder as sanctions and equipment shortages take their toll. Russia will face tough decisions of increasing war expenditures to procure foreign weapons or relying more heavily on infantry, resulting in higher financial costs or personnel losses, possibly greater mobilizations. And over time, as losses mount and the war drags on, Russians will realize the lack of significant gains, having failed to capture all but a few of Ukraine's regional capitals or major cities, and the Russian people will start to wake up as they did in World War I and Russia in Afghanistan. In the long run, time is not on Russia's side here. It will be a lengthy process to help Russians understand that this war cannot be won, but if we in NATO and the collective West maintain or increase our support to Ukraine, it will happen eventually.